welcome again to the second podcast of our series on OneAfrica, introducing the big picture of Africa. What does Africa hold for businesses, for countries, for companies, for corporates? And we have with us again our expert, Mr. Johan Burger.
Now, the AfCFTA has been developed as a catalyst for sustainable growth in Africa. But why Africa? The reality is that Africa, despite what many people would think, provides a lot of opportunities. We're sitting with a growing population, increasing urbanization, and a growing consumer class. Going to industry, we're looking at agriculture that needs to be modernized, mobile money and telecoms making big progress in Africa. The process of digitalization taking place slowly but surely, renewable energy becoming that much more important, manufacturing underperforming currently but with a lot of potential going forward, amongst others due to the need for value addition or beneficiation. Africa exports a lot of raw materials instead of adding value, and this is something which companies and corporates worldwide can look at. Pharmaceutical, we will get back to that later, a lot of opportunity also in retail and in infrastructure development. It has, unfortunately, a couple of challenges. We're looking at security, infrastructure shortage, specifically transport, energy and water. Food insecurity. Africa imports between $35 and $41 billion annually. This is set to grow over the next few years to as much as $80 billion on an annual basis, despite the fact that Africa has about 60% of the remaining arable land in the world. Low levels of access to electricity goes with the renewable energy push. Huge digital divide. I spoke about the low levels of manufacturing. And then also the main reason behind the concept of the AfCFTA is the low level of intra-Africa trade. It is easier and cheaper for Africa to trade with the world than with itself. We're talking about a plus minus 17% intra-Africa trade. Comparison, we're looking at the EU at plus minus 70%, Asia about 59%, and North America at 31%. As such, Africa accounts for only 2% of global trade. Just to give you an example, South African trade figures on Africa, South Africa being the third largest economy currently. In 2019, 27% of South Africa's exports and 12% of its imports were into Africa. The country grew its exports into Africa from about 9 billion rand in 1994 to over 340 billion by 2019. This sounds a lot. However, considering that in 2019, Africa imported about 8 trillion rands worth of goods, South Africa's share of global exports into Africa is still relatively small at 4.25%. It is hoped that this kind of phenomenon will change with the implementation of the AfCFTA. Now, the reality is that it is not an only regional economic community, and there are already 8 existing regional economic communities which the African Union sees as the basis and has been acknowledged by the AU as the basis for the AfCFTA. We're looking at the East African Community, EAC, the Common Market of East African States, COMESA, Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, Southern Africa Development Community, SADC, and then the lesser known ones, Economic Community of Central African States, ECAS, the Community of Saharan States, CENSAT, the Arab Maghreb Union, AMU, and then the number 8, Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD. Now, the purpose of these free trade areas is for businesses and countries to benefit from the possibilities that international economic integration offers. Specifically looking at Africa, according to the African Union, the purpose of these RECs, of regional economic communities, is to facilitate regional economic integration between the members of the individual regions and through the wider African Economic Community, which was established under the Abuja Treaty in 1991. Now, the benefits of the free trade areas, or then the regional economic communities, is Amongst others, then, the mutual gains, increased levels of trade and investment creates a bigger market with new economies of scale, increased economic welfare, more efficient allocation of time and resources, and a greater business competition then can catalyze economic reforms. When we do look at specifically at the AfCFTA, it stems forth from the Agenda 2063 and refers to the Africa we want. The Agenda 2063 provides a strategic framework for socio-economic transformation of Africa within a 50-year period from 2013 to 2063. A couple of key frameworks of Agenda 2063 is in boosting intra-Africa trade, or BIAT, Accelerated Industrial Development for Africa, AIDA, Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa, also referred to as PIDA, and then a very important one is the Comprehensive African Agricultural Development Program, important because it addresses the issue of food security or insecurity. And then fifth, the African Mining Vision. The flagship project of Agenda 2063, looking at all of this, is then the African Continental Free Trade Area, which consists of a couple of key institutions. Firstly, we have the Assembly of the AU, which comprises all the AU heads of state and government, and whose function it is to provide oversight and guidance on the AfCFTA. It is such the ultimate decision-maker for this entity. The Council of Ministers, which comprises the Ministers for Trade, which then has the authority to take decisions in accordance with the AfCFTA agreement, and they report to the Assembly through the Executive Council of the AU. Thirdly, we have the Committee of Ceded Trade Officials, which consists of the permanent secretaries or other officials designated by the various state parties, and they are responsible for the development of the programs and action plans for the implementation of the AfCFTA. Very important institution then is the AfCFTA Secretariat, which is based in Accra in Ghana and is the administrative organ to coordinate the implementation of the AfCFTA. And then lastly, we have the dispute settlement mechanism, which replicates with the necessary adaptations the WTO dispute settlement system. Only state parties in this instance will be able to bring applications, and private party litigation is not possible. Now, the aims of the CFTA is then primarily to boost intra-Africa trade. They're going to do this by providing a comprehensive and mutually beneficial trade agreement among the member states, covering then trade in goods and services, investment, intellectual property rights, and competition policy. Just to give you an indication, with average tariffs at 6.1%, this is 2022 figures, businesses face higher tariffs when they export within Africa than when they export outside it.